Wherever you go, Direct Auto Insurance will be there for you. Whether it's early morning on your way to work or at night after a long day on the other side of town with a few errands still left to do, wherever you are, we've got you covered. To find out how you could save up to 25% and take advantage of flexible payment options, call or stop by any of our 450 Direct Auto stores for a free quote, or visit us at directauto.com. Rates, savings vary. Terms and conditions apply to coverage, discounts, and pay plans. How you buy could impact price. Direct Auto Insurance and insurers in the National General Group, Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
I always wanted to explore my business potential. Florida Technical College helped me make that possible. Thanks to FTC, I earned my degree in entrepreneurship, marketing, and management. I am an Iris Bermudez, and I work in finance.
See why Florida Technical College has been the choice of people like you since 1982. Learn more about our careers in business and in information technology, including entrepreneurship, management and marketing, and more at ftccollege.edu or call 888-981-9707. FTC, your partner in success.
It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I am your host, private investigator Ed Opperman, and this show is brought to you by Audible.com. You go to audibletrial.com/Opperman Report. You can sign up for free and get yourself a free audiobook. This is one of our special pre-recorded shows that we are having available in our members section, and then it'll be available on High Point Radio in the tri-state area, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania. It'll be replayed on Penny Entertainment on Blog Talk Radio Sunday mornings, Talk Superstation, Cave Radio broadcasting twice a week, Para X Radio 7 p.m. Saturday nights, Late Night in the Midlands 4 p.m. Tuesdays, also on Firehorse Network on Wednesday nights, FPRNradio.com Monday to Friday 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time throughout the week. Also, you'll find us on Spreaker, iHeart, TuneIn, Stitcher, and of course, the Opperman Report YouTube channel. I'm really excited about our guest today. He seems to be really tuned into all the same kind of topics that we cover here week after week after week. He's a film producer, an author, award-winning professional journalist, investigative journalist, Tim Tate, and his movie production company is called Interesting Films. And they all do, they're interesting to me, that's for sure, I could tell you that. Hey, Tim, are you there?
I am indeed. Hello.
So, Tim, tell us about yourself. I know you've had a very honored career.
I don't know about honored. I've been doing it a long time. I've been a working journalist, investigative journalist for the best part of 40 years now, and I've been making investigative documentaries, by and large, for British television and other networks, international networks, for much of that time, and writing a lot of books, mostly investigative as well.
And right now, you were just telling me that you have two new books that just came out. One is Hitler's Forgotten Children, and the other one is The Yorkshire Ripper, The Secret Murders. Why don't you tell us a little bit about those books?
Well, Hitler's Forgotten Children is the story of a woman who was called Ingrid von Oelhafen. She was kidnapped in 1942 into the Nazi Lebensborn program, which is, when I first found out about this, it's kind of a surprise that it's one of the least known parts of the Nazis' programs. It was a program created by Himmler to create, I suppose, a new Aryan master race. So there was a combination of suitably Aryan babies being born in Lebensborn homes, and others like Ingrid who looked Aryan as babies being kidnapped from all across the countries that Germany overran during the war and brought up in these homes and handed out to suitably Nazi families to be raised as good little Nazis. Ingrid's story is just extraordinary. She's an amazing woman, a truly amazing woman, who has spent 10 to 15 years investigating and tracking down what happened to her, where, and indeed how. And her story, it's the story of post-war Europe as well as what happened to her in the Lebensborn program. And I'm deeply honored to have worked with her and to have been able to write her story.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating topic. You'd think it would be covered more.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that struck me when I first began looking at this. I have to say I made a documentary film about the Lebensborn program just under 2 years ago for British television, and I filmed Ingrid for it. But as I got the material into the edit suite, I was just sitting there with my film editor, and I said, there's just no way we can get Ingrid's story in this, because it's just too huge. It's not just Germany, it's the former Yugoslavia, it's what happened there, and the story of how she traced back where she came from, and ultimately had this truly awful experience of when she found her original family, her birth family, from whom she'd been kidnapped, to find that they'd been handed another child by the Nazis in her place, who had been brought up as her.
Were they aware of that?
It's very hard to tell. Obviously, her birth parents are dead, and by the time she got to find out who they were past. The person who has been brought up as her doesn't want to talk to Ingrid, but the family, the wider family in what is now Slovenia, have been very supportive, and there have been DNA tests which show that she is who she thinks she is. And they've been incredibly helpful and supportive, but they don't know what Ingrid's birth parents knew.
That's just amazing. I think I saw your film, because I am familiar with the story a little bit. And I tell you, it just seems like everything you cover is all the stuff that we're into over here. So thank you for coming, you know.
Well, no, thank you for having me. I have to say, I'm very privileged to be able to tell stories, and to be able to tell stories that I think are important and need to be told. And the story of Lebensborn is not just the story of this obscene program and this madness of Himmler's belief in pure Aryan blood, but it reflects on everything really that's happened since the Second World War, where somewhere, someone, somewhere is always believes that somebody else is worth less than them because they're from a different race or a creed or a color. And that underlying problem has never gone away.
You know, that's so true. That is so true. And it just seems that this ruling class, you know, that and again, it sort of fits into this whole theme of all the different stories you've been doing, covering over the years. Like this ruling class that thinks that the rest of us are less human than they are.
Yeah. I mean, it's ruling classes, I think, because it's different classes in different places in different parts of the world over different periods. But there is always this sinister and, in my view, terrible attitude which says, oh, well, we're better than them, they're worse than us, therefore it's okay that we discriminate against them, or we kill them, or we exploit them. And that attitude, I mean, you see it everywhere today still. It hasn't gone away.
That sort of ties into the other book you were talking about, the Yorkshire Ripper. This Peter Sutcliffe, who was friends with Jimmy Savile.
Well, so it appears. I mean, he knew Jimmy. He met Jimmy Savile in Broadmoor, a psychiatric hospital where Savile was a visitor. Sutcliffe's story, again, for your listeners in the States, his name probably won't mean as much as it does over here. He was one of Britain's worst serial killers, and for a number of years in the north of the country, he terrorized towns and cities by attacking women at random. Often they were prostitutes, but in many cases they weren't. And the failure to catch him over many years was a deep embarrassment to police forces in that part of the country. And what we've done in this book, I've written it with a former police intelligence officer who began to put together the clues from cold cases, long cold cases, was to show that Sutcliffe is the most likely killer of at least 23 more people. He was convicted of 13. And these 23 cases have just been left unsolved in the files. And yet everything points to him as the most likely killer. And yet this case has been surrounded by extraordinary levels of secrecy, so that evidence has been suppressed and is being hidden, and is still, to this day, he was convicted in 1981 originally, it is still secret in this country.
Now, is he alive today?
Sutcliffe, yeah. He is living in a great deal more comfort than, in my view, he deserves. There was a trial back in 81, and the jury was asked to decide whether he was mad or bad, because he claimed he was mad. And the jury said, no, he's bad, and he needs to go to prison. And he went to prison, but in, again, very secretive procedures. This country is very good at secrecy. He was quietly shifted out of the prison system into the much more comfortable confines of a prison psychiatric hospital. And that's where he's been for the last 30-odd years.
Yeah, and somehow he's getting visits with Jimmy Savile and also this boxing champion as well.
I didn't know the boxing champion. Savile was a very strange man,
yeah.
And he did have, for reasons which have yet to be fully explained in this country, almost the free run of this psychiatric hospital, Broadmoor, and that's how he came into contact with Sutcliffe.
Right. Now, if this was in the States here, and there were 23 unsolved murders that were connected to a convicted serial killer, the cops would love to write those off to someone they already had in custody. Now, why wouldn't that be the case over there?
You know, that's a really good question. It's a question we've been asking my colleague and I for, 18 months. And every time we ask that question, and every time we submit our equivalent of one of your FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, requests, we get a stonewall response saying, we're not telling you.
Really?
Yeah, we could paper the walls with the rejection of our Freedom of Information Act requests.
Well, what do you suspect the reason is? Did he have connections to powerful people?
No, I don't think it is. I think it's much more simple than that. In my view, a lot of these things boil down to the simplest explanation. The investigation, the original investigation of Sutcliffe's crimes was so badly mishandled, partially because the British police, or the police force for the region concerned in those times, in the late 70s and early 80s, was, as all police forces in this country were very backward at that point. We didn't have computers. Everything was on a piece of paper. And it was a huge and time-consuming and debilitating investigation, but they did make serious mistakes. What happened thereafter was the prosecution, instead of trying to try Sutcliffe for his crimes, entered into a pretty shabby backdoor plea bargain with him and his lawyers, so that they would allow him to plead guilty, to plead that he was mad, and therefore shouldn't be held accountable. Now, if the prosecution is doing that, that's deeply disturbing. And I think what's happened ever since has been probably a result of embarrassment at firstly the incompetence of the regional police investigation, and secondly embarrassment within the very senior levels of the prosecution, what is the equivalent, our equivalent of your federal prosecution system, at the way it was duped by Sutcliffe way back in 1981.
Now, was it that he had a really top-notch legal defense team? Could that have been it?
No, I mean, the odd thing for me, and I have to say I lived through this period as a young reporter. I just started as a cub reporter, we used to call them in those days.